Hey guys, how's it going? Welcome to this video where we are going to be implementing this sidebar navigation in Angular. We are mainly going to be focusing on the styling of these list items. So we're going to be implementing these hover effects and transitions. Okay, cool. So let's actually zoom out to 100%. So this is what it looks like at 100% zoom. Okay, cool. Alright then, let's get straight into the tutorial. Alright then, so the first thing we want to do is we want to go and find the place where we want to create the project. So here I have this projects directory, and this is where I want to create the Angular project. So I'm going to open a terminal here. Okay, so now I have a terminal which is in this directory. So now let's use the Angular CLI to generate a new project using ng-new and then the project name, which I'm going to call list-item-hover effect. Okay, and I'm going to add a few flags. So the first one is skip tests and routing is equal to true. Okay, press enter. Cool, alright, so now the Angular project has been created. Let's just change directory and go into the project. So cd and then list-item-hover-effect, press enter, and now we want to open this in our editor. I personally use Visual Studio Code, so I'm going to open this in Visual Studio Code. Alright then, okay, so first of all, let's go to the terminal over here and let's serve this application. So let's use the Angular CLI command ng-serve to serve our application. Okay, and once that's done, then we can go to the browser and we can go to localhost 4200. And now we have this sharp here. This is the default placeholder content that the Angular CLI creates for us when we create our application. So that is why we have this stuff here. Let's now go back to the code and let's go to the app.component.html. And here we can see the markup for this placeholder content here. Okay, so let's actually remove all of this and let's only keep the router outlet. Okay, so let's do this. Okay, and now we only have the router outlet tag. We need this for routing, so keep that in there. And let's save that now. And let's go back to the browser. And now we can see that we don't have any content in the browser. Great. And we can actually put some test content here. Testing. And save that. And we can then go back to the browser. And we can then see we have testing sharp here. Okay. Cool, so let's delete that so that the app.component.html only contains this router outlet tag. Okay, cool. The next thing we want to do is we want to create a component for the page that we'll be using to create and test out this effect. So let's go and open up a new terminal here and let's use the Angular CLI to generate a new component. So let's do ng generate component. And then let's call this test-page. Okay, and once that's been created, then we have this new folder here inside the app folder called test page. And this folder contains all of the files we need for this component. So here we have the CSS, the HTML, and the component class. Okay, so let's go to the HTML. And we can see here that the Angular CLI has automatically generated some content here and put it inside this file. So let's keep it like this for now. And let's now go to the routing module and set up the routes so that we can access that page when we are at this URL here. Okay, so let's now go back here and let's now add a route object which contains the path, and the path in this case will be the empty string because we want to see this component when we're at this route here, this path here. Okay, so let's go back here and let's set the component to test page component. Okay, and let's save that. And now let's go back to the browser. And now we can see that we have test page works showing up here. Great. So now we have correctly configured the routes so that when we're at this path, we see the test page component show up here. Great. And the reason that we still have testing is because we forgot to save this file. So let's save this now. And let's go back to the browser. And now we only have test page works showing up here. Great. Okay. And let's now go back to the code. And let's go back to the test page component.html. Let's work inside this file. So first of all, let's remove this. Okay. And now let's create the markup for this effect. So first of all, let's actually just create the structure of the page. So let's create a new div that has the class of page container. And inside here, let's create a div for the sidebar. So div that has the class of sidebar. Okay. And we're going to have the sidebar so that the list items will be inside the sidebar. You don't have to do this for this effect, but I'm just creating a demo sort of structure. So this effect will be in the context of a sidebar. Okay, and let's actually just style this first. So let's now save this, and let's go to the browser, and we can see here that we don't see anything, and that's because we haven't styled these classes. So let's go to the CSS file here, and let's start styling these classes. So first of all, let's create the page container styles. And actually, let's leave this for now, and let's first work on the sidebar styles. So the sidebar has to be 100% height, like that, and it has to be width 300 pixels. And let's set the background to orange, just for testing purposes, so that we can see if it's being displayed correctly. Okay, and let's save this now. And let's go back to our browser, and we still can't see anything. That's because we have to, first of all, set the parent divs to height 100%. So the page container is the parent to the sidebar, as we can see in the markup. This div is the parent of this div here. So this has to be set to height 100%. Let's save that. And let's go back to our application in the browser. And we still can't see anything. That's actually because if we inspect this, we can see that here we have the router outlet, and here we have the app test page, and this div here has height 100%, but the parent elements don't have height 100%. So for example, the body tag should have height 100% as well, like that. Okay, and we probably also have to set the HTML tag to height 100% as well. Let's try that. Great, there we go. So when we set the HTML and body tags to height 100%, then we can see this orange sidebar. Awesome. So let's actually go and do that inside the CSS code here. And we can't actually do it here because these are the styles for the test page component. We have to create styles for the HTML and body tags, which are outside of the context of this component. Because these styles are scoped only to the test page component. So let's go to the global style sheet, which is styles.css. There we go. And here, let's just do HTML, body. Okay, so let's set height to 100%. And let's save this now. And let's go back to the browser. And now we can see that we have this sidebar showing up here. Great. And if we remove this line of code and save it, then it goes away. Okay, so we need this height 100% showing up here. Cool, alright, so let's save that now, and let's go back to the browser, and it's showing up here again. Cool. One issue we have to fix is this margin that we have here. The browser automatically sets some margin around here, but we don't actually want this. We want this sidebar to be flush against the sides of the window. So let's go to the style sheet and let's set margin to 0, and let's save that now, and let's go back to the browser, and now that margin has gone. Great. So let's go back to the styles, and let's actually close this because we don't need to work inside the styles.css file anymore. And let's go back to the testpage.component.css file, and let's work on the sidebar. So let's go to the sidebar styles, and let's actually change the background to RGBA 0, 0, 0, and then 0.2. So this will create a black with an alpha value of 0.2, which means it has 20% opacity. Okay, let's save this now, and let's go back to our browser, and now we can see this kind of grey color. The reason it's grey is because the background color of the page is white. So when you overlay a transparent black on top of it, then it looks grey. But let's actually change the background color of the whole page to a dark blue. So let's go to the page container class, and let's set the background to RGB 35, 42, 58. Okay. And that is a dark blue with a bit of grey in it. Okay, so let's save that now. And let's go back to our browser. And now we have this dark blue with this sidebar being a bit darker because it has a black background with an alpha of 0.2. Cool, alright, so now let's go back to the code. Okay, and that's actually all we have to do for these classes, for the styling of these two classes. So let's go back to the template and let's continue working on the markup. So now we have the basic layout of the page, which we only needed for demo purposes. So now we can actually work on the actual effect. So let's go here and let's create a div which has the class of list items. Okay, and let's now create the list items inside here. So let's create some divs inside here with the class of list item. Cool, alright. Let's set the content of this list item to this is a test item. Okay, and let's create a few of them like that, and let's save that now, and let's now go back to the browser. Okay, and here we can actually see these three items being displayed here. Currently they are very hard to see because of the small font and the dark text color. So let's go and style those now. Let's go back to the code and let's go to the style sheet and let's style the list item class. So list dash item. Okay, and first of all, let's set the font size to 18 pixels. And let's save that now. And let's go back to the browser. And now these are larger. Let's actually set these to 20 pixels. And let's set the color to white. Okay, let's save that now. And let's go back to the browser. Great, and now these are much easier to see. Great, let's now go back to the style sheet and let's set the padding. Let's set the padding to 20 pixels and let's save that and let's go back to the browser. Okay, so now these items have 20 pixels of padding on all 4 sides of the element. And we can see that if we inspect it. So here we have this green section, and that is the padding. Okay, so let's actually change this so that there's less padding on the top and bottom, because currently there's a lot of space in between these items. So let's go here and let's change this so that the left and right have 20 pixels of padding and the top and bottom have 0. Later on we will change this to a larger value, but for now let's just change it to 0 like that, and let's save that, and let's go back to the browser. And now this is actually the wrong way around. This has to be 0 and 20 pixels. Okay, let's save that now, and let's go back to the browser. Cool, alright, so these items now have 20 pixels of padding on the left and right, but no padding on the top and bottom. Cool. So now let's change that so that we have 10 pixels on the top and bottom. Let's save that, and let's go back to the browser. Okay, and that looks much better. Cool, alright. Let's now put some spacing in between these items and the top of the sidebar. Let's go back to the code, and let's go and create some styles for the list items class, because here in the template we have this div which has the class of list items, which contains all of these list item divs. So let's create the styles for the list items, and inside here we can set the margin top to 50 pixels. Okay, let's save that now, and let's go back to the browser. Okay, and we get this white bit up here. Why is that? List items. It should have been inside the sidebar. I'm not sure why that's happening. Okay. Let's go back to the code and let's see what's happening. So if we go back to the markup, we have list items, and then that should be inside sidebar. Why is that happening? Let's just try and use padding instead. Let's say padding top is 50 pixels. Let's save that, and let's go back to the browser, and that seems to work. Okay, that's good. But I wonder why margin wasn't working. Alright, so it seems like that is meant to happen. The top margin can sometimes go outside of its parent. To fix it, we can use padding top instead of margin top. Okay. Here are some things we can do. We can set the display to something other than block, or you can set float to something other than none, or you can remove the margin and instead use padding. Okay, so that's what we are doing. Alright, let's close this, and let's go back here. Alright, so let's just reload the page, and now that works. Cool. Let's go back to the code, and let's just change this to 100 pixels, and save that. Okay, cool. The next thing we can do is we can change this font. So let's actually go to Google Fonts, and let's go and find a good font. Let's just use Roboto, this font here. Let's add it, and let's go here, and let's copy this, and let's now go back to our code, and let's go to the index.html file, and let's paste it in here. Cool. Alright, so let's save that now, and let's go back to the style sheet, and let's set the list item font family. Let's set this to Roboto. Okay, cool. Let's save this now, and let's go back to our browser. Let's close this, and here we can see that the font has changed to Roboto. Great. Cool. Alright, so the next thing we can do is we can add an icon to these items. So for this, we are going to be using material icons. And for this demo, I'm going to use the bookmark icon. But you can use whatever icon you want. I'm just going to use this icon here. So first of all, we have to import material icons into our project. Okay, so let's go to the developer guide. And we can go and click on icon fonts for the web. Okay, and here we have this first method using via Google Web Fonts. This is what we're going to use. So let's just copy this, and let's go back to our code, and let's go to the index.html file again, and let's paste that in. There we go. Let's save that now, and let's close this, and let's go back to the browser. Okay, and let's actually see how we use it. Let's see how we use it. Okay, using the icons in HTML. So here is an example where we have an I tag, which has the class of material icons, and it then specifies which icon in the content of that tag. Cool. Alright, so let's go back to our code, and let's go to the template. Alright, so let's go to this item here, and let's just add some new lines here. Okay, and just before the text, let's put an icon. So let's create an I tag, which has the class of material dash icons, and let's put face in here. Let's save that now, and let's go back to our browser, and let's go back to the application here, and here we can see we have this icon. Great. Let's go back to the code, and let's change this to bookmark. Okay, and let's go back to the application, and now we have this bookmark icon. Great. Let's actually go back here, and here we can see that the icon that we want is the bookmark underscore border. So let's actually change this to bookmark underscore border, and let's save that, and let's go back to the application in the browser. Great, and here we can see that we have this bordered bookmark icon here. Cool. So let's actually do that with all of them. Let's go back to the code, and let's remove these two. Let's delete those, and let's just copy and paste these a few times. Cool. Alright, let's save that, and let's go back to the application. Cool. Alright, so that works. Let's now style this so that these are centered, because currently they're not centered. This is higher than this one. So let's go back to the code, and let's go to the style sheet. Let's set this list item to display flex. Let's save this now, and let's go back to the application, and now they have been centered. Cool. Alright, so it seems that by just setting the display to flex, it has automatically aligned the text and the icon. Awesome. Let's now add some padding in between this icon and the text. Okay, so let's go to the list item, and actually the way that we can do this is by creating some styles for the material icon tag that is inside the list item div, because here we have this div which has the class of list item, and inside that we have this I tag which has the class of material icons, and this is the icon. So we can target this inside the CSS by doing dot list item and then I dot material icons. Okay, and we can hover over this to see how this works. So here we have an element that has the class of list item, and inside that we have an I tag which has the class of material icons. Cool, alright, so that is exactly what we want. So let's set the margin right to 50 pixels. Let's save that, and let's go back to the browser, and now we can see that we have this spacing here. Cool, so we know that the spacing is working. Let's now go back to the code and let's change this to a more reasonable amount, maybe 20 pixels, and let's save that and let's go back to the application. Cool, alright, so that's pretty good. Let's maybe decrease it a bit, maybe 15 pixels. Okay, let's see. Cool, so that's pretty good. Maybe 12 pixels actually. Cool, alright, so that looks good. One thing that we could do is decrease the size of this text because it seems like the icon is smaller than the text. Or we could increase the size of the icon, but then it might be a bit too big. I like the icon at that size actually. Let's decrease the size of this list item. And actually, let's actually set the font size of this to 24 pixels. And let's go back to the application. And it stayed the same size. Okay, so this icon was already by default 24 pixels. So that's fine. Okay, so let's go and decrease the size of this list item to 18 pixels. And let's save that. And let's go back to the browser. Cool, alright, so that looks a lot better actually. However, these aren't centered. So let's center that now. Let's set this to justify content center, and hopefully that should work. Let's save that and let's go back to the browser. Alright, so that actually centered it horizontally, not vertically. So let's not use justify content, but let's instead use align items. Okay, let's save that and let's go back to the application, and there we go. So I think these are now centered. Yeah, alright, these are now centered. Cool. Let's go to 100% zoom. I think we can actually try and change this font. Let's see if we can find something different on Google Fonts. Okay. Let's try Open Sans. Let's select this font and let's copy this and let's go back to our code. Let's go to index.html. Okay, and let's remove this Roboto import. Let's remove this Roboto import and let's paste in the Open Sans import. Let's save this now and let's go to the test page.component.css and let's change the font family here to Open Sans. Okay, let's save this now and let's go back to the application. And I think that looks a lot better. Cool, alright. Yeah, I think this looks a lot better. Alright, so let's now go back to the code and let's actually change the color here to RGBA 255 255 255, so white, but with a 0.8 alpha value. Okay, so let's save that and let's go back to the application. Okay, and that looks a bit too muted, so let's change this to 0.95. Let's save that and let's go back to the application. Okay, so that looks good now. Let's now work on the hover effect. So actually, before we do that, let's just set the cursor to pointer so that these look clickable. Let's go back here and let's add cursor pointer to the list item class, and let's save that. Let's save it, and let's go back to the application. And now, when we hover over these items, we get this pointer cursor showing, and now these look clickable. Cool. So let's now work on what happens when we hover over those items. So let's now go here and let's create some styles for when we hover over the list item. So dot list dash item :hover. Okay, so these styles inside here will now be applied when we hover over the list item. Okay, so inside here, let's just set the color to orange, just for testing purposes, to see if it works. Let's save this, and let's go back to our application. Okay, and let's try and hover over these items. Cool. Awesome, so that is now working. Okay, let's go back to the code. Okay, and let's change the color here to white, so that when we hover over the list items, the color changes to a full white with no transparency. Okay, let's save that, and let's go back to our application. And now we get a very, very slight change to white. So that's just a small change. That won't be the full effect, but that will be a very subtle change. That's good. Let's now create the effect with the transforming left border. It's not really a border because we won't be using the border property in CSS. We won't be using this because there is limited animation potential with the border property. Instead, we will be using a shape to look like a border. And to create that shape element, we are going to be using a pseudo element. So we are going to be using the before pseudo element. So let's go here and let's create some styling for the before pseudo element on the list item class. So dot list item, and then do 2 colons and before. There we go. Okay, and now this will style the pseudo element on the element that has the class list item. Okay, so pseudo elements act exactly like normal elements, except we don't have to put them explicitly in the markup. So you could think of pseudo elements as elements that are always there. They are always implicitly there, but we don't have to write the markup for them. Normally, these pseudo elements aren't styled, but we can explicitly style them so that they appear on the page in our application. Okay, so let's style this. Let's set the position to absolute. We have to do this because we want this shape to be on top of the element. Okay, and let's set the height to 100%. Okay, and let's set the width to 50 pixels. Okay, and let's actually set top to 0. Okay, so that it's positioned correctly, so that it's top aligned. Okay, and let's save that now, and let's go back to our application. Okay, we can't see anything. Well, that's because we haven't set any background color. So background color, let's set this to orange, just for testing purposes. Let's save that, and let's go back to our application. And we still can't see anything. That's actually because with pseudo elements, we can't just style them. We have to actually set its content, because pseudo elements won't appear unless they have a value for the content property. Okay, so let's go up here and set the content to a blank string. Let's save that now, and let's go back to our application. Great. So here we can see that we have this orange thing here. This isn't exactly what we want, but it's a good sign that it's working. So, first of all, the reason that this isn't showing in the individual items is because we set this to position absolute, but we didn't set position relative on these individual list items. So currently, these pseudo elements are basing their calculations for the width and the height on the nearest parent element, which has position relative. So we need to make sure that the list item class has position relative. Okay, so let's go back to our code and let's go to list item up here and let's set position to relative. Okay, let's save that now and let's go back to our application and there we go. That's much better. So now each item has its pseudo element. Cool, alright, let's go back to our code and let's go to the pseudo element here and let's set the width to 5 pixels. Let's try that. Let's save that and let's go back to our application. Cool, alright, so that's much better. One thing that we want to do though is move this to the left hand side. So let's do that. Let's go back here and let's set left to 0. Okay, let's save that now and let's go back to the application. Cool, so these are now on the left hand side. Awesome, okay, let's go back to our code and we now only want to show this when we hover over the item. So let's, by default, set opacity to 0 by default. Okay, so that's just a comment there. And let's set the opacity to 0. Cool. Let's save that now and let's go back to our application. And now we can't see that shape because we set the opacity to 0. So now let's go back to our code and let's set the opacity to 1 when we hover over the list item. Okay, let's do .list item, hover, and then do before. Okay, so this will now target the before pseudo element when we are hovering over the list item. Okay, let's now set the opacity to 1 and let's save that and let's go back to our application and let's try this. Let's try and hover over these. Awesome. Okay, so that works. Awesome. Okay, let's go back to our application, the code, and now let's make a more sophisticated effect. Instead of just showing that shape, let's transform the shape so that it vertically grows when we hover over it. So let's do a transform up here in the list item before. Here, let's do a transform and let's set this to scale Y. So scale in the Y axis, in the vertical axis, and let's set this to 0. Okay, and now let's go here and let's set transform scale Y 1. Okay, let's save this now and let's go back to our application and let's try and hover over these items. Okay, so this looks exactly the same. The reason for that is because we haven't set a transition. So let's set a transition here in the list item before. So let's set transition, transform 0.2 seconds. And let's also transition the opacity, 0.2 seconds. Okay, let's save that now. And let's go back to our application. Okay, and let's try this. There we go. Awesome. So now we get this nice effect. Cool. We could remove this opacity 0 statement here and save that. And then we would be able to see this transform effect by itself. So let's zoom in. This is the transform effect by itself. It's scaling in the y-axis like that when we hover over it. Cool. but I think it looks better with the opacity set to 0 by default. Let's save that, and let's go back to the application. And I think that looks better. Cool, all right. Let's now go back to the code, and let's actually make this, let's make the text color of the list item a bit more transparent. Let's set this to 0.9, and let's save that, and let's go back to our application, and I think that looks better. Cool, all right. Let's now make this a bit less wide. Let's go back to the code, and let's go to the list item before pseudo element. Okay, and let's set the width to 3 pixels. Okay, let's save that now, and let's go back to the application, and I think that looks better. Cool. Let's zoom out. Cool, all right, that looks good. Let's now change the color of this shape here. Let's go back here, and let's change the background color. Let's change it from orange to pink. Okay, let's save that now, and let's go back to the application, and that looks pretty good. Cool, all right. Cool. What else can we do here? What else can we do? I think we can still reduce the opacity of this text. I think it would look better if this was 8.5. Let's save that. All right, cool. So now we have the hover effect working. The next thing we want to do is create the selected state, because these are sidebar items. So in this context of this demonstration, they will have 3 states. They will have the normal state, the hover state, and the selected state. So we have to create the styles for the selected state. But before we do that, we have to we first have to set up some routing so that these list items link out to other pages, so that when we click on one of these items, they will then change the view here, kind of like tabs. So let's implement that now. Let's go back to our code, and first of all we have to create a few components, just a few sample page components. So let's go to the terminal, and let's use the Angular CLI to generate these components. ng generate component sample page 1. Okay, press enter. Okay, and let's do the same thing again. ng generate component sample page 2, and let's do it one last time. ng generate component sample page 3. Okay, we're not actually going to do anything with these components, so they currently just have their default content that the Angular CLI has generated. So we will leave these as they are. We just need these so that we can have something to show when we click on these list items. So for example, this one will show the sample page 1, and this will show the sample page 2, and this will show the sample page 3. Okay, so let's go back to the code, and now that we've got these components, we can now go to the routing module, and we can create some new routes. So first of all, we want to set this up so that we have a nested route configuration, so that the test page component is the parent of all of these new routes, so that we can still keep all of this sidebar the same across all of these routes. So let's set the children property here, and this is an array of root objects. So let's set the path of this route to page -1, and let's set the component to sample page 1, like that, and let's do the same thing for page 2, page -2, and sample page 2 component, like that, and the same for page 3. Okay, cool. Let's save that now, and let's go back to our application. Okay, and let's go to the address bar here, and let's do /page -1. Okay, and this actually works. So we don't get any errors. That's good. That's good, because if we had a invalid route here, then we should get an error. Yep. So here we get a white screen and an error when we put in an invalid URL. So /page1 works because we can see our test page component and we don't get any errors. That's good. However, we can't see the sample page 1 component, even though we specified that the component is sample page 1 component. We still can't see it in the UI. The reason for this is because we haven't added the router outlet tag to the test page component. So let's go back to our code and let's actually close this routing module. Okay, and let's go to the test page component.html. Okay, and let's go just outside of the sidebar div and let's include the router outlet tag, like that. Okay, let's save that now and let's go back to our application. Okay, and we still can't see anything, so that's not good. Let's look at the elements here. So we do have this router outlet here, and we do actually have the sample page 1 component being loaded in. Oh, okay, so it's actually here. Okay, cool. Okay, so this is a bit weird because the component is within the page container div. As we can see here, the closing div tag is after this component, so it's within the page container div. However, it's being displayed afterwards. So that's a bit weird. Let's go and fix that now. Maybe we can fix this issue by using Flexbox in the page container class. So let's go back to our code and let's go to the style sheet and let's go to the page container up here and let's set this. Let's set display to flex. Okay, let's save that now and let's go back to our application. Okay, and that fixed it. So now we have the text being shown here. Awesome. Cool. That's really good. Let's do a few more things. Let's go here and let's go to the template and let's actually encapsulate the router outlet tag in a div. Okay, and let's set the class on this div to page content container. Okay, and let's save that. Okay, and let's go to the style sheet and let's create the page content container here and let's set some padding, 50 pixels, and that's it for now. Let's save that and let's go back to the application, and now we have 50 pixels of padding. That's good. Cool. All right. Okay, cool. Let's actually go to this component and let's actually change this because it doesn't actually look that nice. So let's go to sample page1.component.html. Let's change this to a h1 tag, which says sample page1. Okay, and let's save that and let's go back to the application. Okay, let's actually go to the global style sheet, styles.css, and let's actually set the font family inside here, font-family to Open Sans. The reason for this is because currently this has the default font. So by doing this, we should be setting all of the elements in our application to use the font family Open Sans by default. Okay, let's save that now and let's go back to our application. And there we go. Cool. So now the font of this has been changed to Open Sans. Cool. One other thing is that this H1 by default has some margin. Let's actually remove this margin. Let's go to styles.css and let's set H1, H2, H3, H4, H5, H6, and P tags. Let's set all of these tags to have no margin and no padding by default. Okay, let's save that now and let's go back to the application. And I think that's good now. Cool. All right. Normally, you wouldn't need to do this if you're using a CSS framework or a CSS reset. However, in this case, we need to create some styling in some situations where the browser automatically sets margin and padding. Anyways, let's move on to the actual items and setting this up with links to the components. But before we do that, let's just quickly change this to a white color. So let's go back to the code and let's go to the sample page-1.component.html and let's just set the style to color white like that, and let's save that now and let's go back to the application. Cool, so that worked. However, this is far too bright. So let's go back to the code and let's change this to RGBA 255, 255, 255 for white, and then the alpha value will be 0.7. Okay, let's save that now and let's go back to the application. And now it's a much more muted white. Okay. However, that is a bit too grey, so let's make that 0.85 and let's go back to the application, and that's much better. Also, this seems a bit, the rendering on this text isn't that good, so let's try and change that. I think we can make this better by, I think it's text rendering, and set this to optimize legibility. Let's try font smoothing. Okay, let's try and changing the size. Alright, well that seems to work. I am just going to copy these three. Okay, let's just copy that and let's go back to the code, and I'm going to go to styles.css and I'm going to paste them in here. Okay, save that and let's go back to the application, and that looks a bit better. Okay, so that's now good. Let's now move on to the other sample pages. Okay, let's go to sample page 2. Okay, and let's get rid of this and let's do H1 and let's set this to sample page 2, and let's set the style color RGBA 255, 255, 255, 0.85. Okay, save that, and let's go back to the application, and let's go to /page2 in the URL. Great, so now we have sample page 2 showing up here, and let's go back to page 1. Here we have sample page 1. Awesome. Let's now go and quickly do the third one. So sample page 3. Sample 3. Sample page 3.html. Okay. And let's get rid of that. And let's do h1 sample page 3. Or let's actually just change this to something like this is page 3. Okay, let's save that now, and let's go back to our application, and let's go to /page3 in the URL. Okay, and here we have this. Cool. Let's just quickly make this white. So let's do style, color, RGBA, 255, 255, 255, 0.85. Cool. All right, let's save that now, and let's go back to our application, and that works. Awesome. All right, so now that we have these routes set up, we can now set up these items to link to those pages. So let's go back to our code, and let's close this, let's close this, let's close this, close this, and let's close this. Okay. And let's now go to the test page.component.html, and let's go up to these list items, and let's now link them up. So here, let's actually change these to A tags. Okay. And let's now go to this one, and let's do router link is equal to /page-1, and let's go down here, and let's do router link is equal to /page-2, and let's go to the last one here, and let's do router link is equal to page-3 /page-3. Okay, let's save that now, and let's go back to the application, and here we have this underline here. This is because we made this into an A tag which has a link. Let's go and fix that quickly. Let's go back to the code, and let's go to the test page.component.css. Let's just get rid of this blank line here. And actually, let's do the style in the global style sheet. So let's just save this quickly, and let's go to styles.css. Okay, and let's set the A tag to text decoration none. Okay, so that should remove that underline. Let's save that now, and let's go back to the application. Cool, okay, and now we no longer have the text decoration. We no longer have that underline. Cool. So now let's test if these links work. Let's click on this one. Cool, all right, so we've been sent to the first page. Awesome, so this link works, and this one takes us to sample page 2. Awesome. Cool, so these links work. Awesome, okay, so now that these links work, we can now work on the selected state styling. So let's go and do that now. Let's go back to the code, and let's close this. We don't need that anymore. And let's go to the template for the test page component, and we can now use the router link active directive on these links. So let's go here, and let's add router link active is equal to selected. So what this will do is it will apply the selected class to this element when we are at this router link. So when we are at this page, slash page 1, then this element here will have the selected class applied to it. And we can see this if we go to the CSS file and we add a new class here called selected. Actually, let's go up. Let's go here and let's do dot list item dot selected. So these styles will be applied when we have an element which has the class of list item and selected. Okay, so let's for now just set the background to orange. Okay, let's save that and let's go back to the template and save this, and let's go back to our browser. Okay, and let's go to page 1, and there we go. So now we are at slash page 1, and this list item now has an orange background because it's the active router link, and it now has the selected class on it, as we can see here, list item selected. Okay, so that is what the router link active directive does. And now let's go back to the code and let's add this router link active directive to all of our list items. Okay, so let's go here and let's do router link active is equal to selected. And let's now go to this one and do router link active is equal to selected. Cool, all right. Let's save that now and let's go back to our browser. Okay, and let's now click on this one, and now this one has the orange background. Awesome. Cool, so now this works for all of our list items. Great. Cool, so now we can change the styling of the selected class to make this look nicer. Okay, so let's go back to our code and let's go to the CSS file and let's remove this. We don't need that anymore. Okay, and what I want to do is apply the current hover styles, this style here, to the selected styling, and then we will then change the hover styles to something different. So let's go here. So here we have the styles for the list item hover. Let's just copy this and paste it in here. Okay, and the next thing I want to do is I want to change the before pseudo element styling so that we only scale it up and make it visible when the list item is selected. Okay, so let's change this so we don't have hover anymore. Let's remove that, and instead let's make this dot list item dot selected, and then we have the before pseudo element. Okay, so we can see here that this is what it will look like. So we have an element which has the class of list item and selected, and it's the before pseudo element that we are targeting. Okay, cool. So let's save that now, and let's now go back to our browser and let's try and hover over this. Okay, and we no longer have that shape expanding. Okay, cool. And now let's click on this, and we can now see that the border shape here has animated in, and the one that was here has animated out, like that. Cool, alright. The next thing we can do is make the hover animation more interesting, because we've removed the hover animation for this shape here. So let's make this more interesting. Let's go back to the code and let's create some styling for dot list item hover before. Okay, this will now affect the before pseudo element when we are hovering over the list item. Okay, so in here let's set the opacity to 0.5 and let's set transform to scale Y 0.5, and let's see how that looks. Okay, let's save that now, and let's go back to the browser, and let's hover over this item. Okay, cool. So now we have this animation here, where this shape here is expanding only 50% of the height, because we did scale 0.5. Okay, cool. So that was pretty cool. Let's now try and click on this item. So now the shape has expanded to the full height, and it has full opacity. Awesome. Okay, let's go back to the code. Now we can just try and play around with it and try some different things and see how it looks. So let's try and set the scale X here to scale the width. Let's set this to 2. Let's save that now, and let's go back to the browser, and let's see how this looks. Okay, that looks pretty cool. Let's now click on one of these items. Okay, and then it kind of morphs into this selected state, like that. Cool, alright. Let's try this with a different value here. Let's put 5, for example. That's probably too much, but let's try it. Let's save that, and let's go back to the browser, and let's see. Okay, so that looks pretty bad. Okay, but that's fine. Let's just go and experiment some more. Let's set this to 3, and let's see what happens if we save that and go back to the browser. Okay, that looks pretty bad. Okay, so let's go back here and change this back to 2. Okay, and let's save that, and let's go back to the browser, and let's see what this looks like now. Alright, cool. So I think that looks pretty good. Let's actually make this slightly less opacity, I think. Let's make this 0.35, and let's save that, and let's go back to the browser. Okay, and that looks much better, I think. Cool. Cool, alright, so that is the effect. Feel free to tweak the values and experiment with other properties maybe. There are many ways to customize this effect. Let's actually just look at this in full screen, okay, and let's zoom out to 100%, and let's see how this looks. Cool. Awesome. Awesome. I think that looks pretty good. Alright then, so that's the end of this video. Thank you guys so much for watching this video. Please let me know what you thought of this video down below in the comments, and I'll see you in the next video.